Judy, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I am fantastic, Joan. Thank you so much. And it's so good to be here. I'm really looking forward to this.
Awesome. I'm excited to talk to you. It's I think it's really fascinating what the life you've created for yourself based on or how you've done it and kind of what you've learned along the way. So I'm really excited to dive into all of that. But before we do that, and this probably will be a good segue into the conversation later anyway, who are you?
Who am I? That's a good question. I am somebody who has dedicated their life to living an iconic life. That's who I am. A life of adventure, a life of love, compassion, empathy, and gratitude. A life of seeing opportunities and potentiality every second of every day. That's who I am.
That is beautifully said. I love it. I love it. And I know a lot of what you've done has been a lot of what you've created both for yourself and for your life and for everything has really been due to like what you've learned yourself, what you've created for yourself. So I would love for you, you can share as much or as little as you want, but I would love for you to share some of your story and just like how you came to create the things that you have for yourself.
Right. I think one of the pathways to me dedicating my life to living an iconic life is through having learned and having come to realize that we are more than just mortal beings. We are superhuman, as Dr. Joe Dispenza would say. We are what I call the individualized physical manifestation of the universe. So therefore, we all have the capacity of a God mind, a universal mind. And I'm talking about soul. I'm not talking about any religion or anything like that, just talking about our soul. And one of the things when I realized that, when I understood that, when I saw that is our capacity, that's the truth of who we are, then I thought, well, if that's the case, there is absolutely no mortal challenge I could ever experience that will be greater than me. So therefore, if that is the case, there's no challenge that I could ever experience that could break me, that would define me, that would hold me back from achieving what I would love. And if that's the case, then I have everything within me to create what I define as an iconic life, according to my values and my purpose in life. And that is literally what I do. That's what I've gone to create. Now, what I have created in my life was not predictable. And if you are trying to think about it logically, you will think it's not possible. It's impossible because you cannot logically create the life that I have created based on what we understand to be true in society. So, because the life that I would, if the life that I was predictably, potentially going to create was one of suffering, was one of trauma, perpetuating suffering, perpetuating pain, and of lack and all the low vibrational things. But instead, my life has been one of love. I married a man, a 1 in a billion man, been together for 23 years. Best friend, my soulmate, my business partner. I have businesses that I absolutely love. I travel. I'm a nomad. I travel. I'm now living in Mexico, been living for 16 months in Barbados. See how long we are in Mexico. And I have lived a life, an extraordinary life of adventure. How was this possible and why? So to answer your question about my story, I'll go back to the beginning. where I was living in Ireland, and I was locked up from the age of 3 until I escaped in my early 20s. And during that time, experienced the most heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, inhumane treatment, torture, abuse, used as a slave. It was horrendous. So many times near death. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, had the most brutal home abortions. So it was to the point where I literally lived because my heart beat. I literally felt like a piece of meat that literally lived just because my heart beat, for no other reason. I felt nothing, I was nothing, I was worth nothing. I didn't even have clothes. I was wearing old men's clothes. I didn't even have girls' clothes or women's clothes. I was wearing old men's clothes. I had nothing. I didn't have an identity, nothing. Was uneducated, could barely read or write until about 15. So that was my reality. So you can see that predictably that would lead to a life of more and more suffering, and certainly not adventure, love, and prosperity. So one of the things that happened to me that was the turning point in my life, that gave me the awareness, the awakening, so to speak, that we are so much more than our mortal bodies, was one day after a particularly bad bout or session of torture that went on for like something between 10 and 14 hours, which was not unusual, through the night. And it was in November, and it was in Dublin in Ireland. And I remember walking into the bathroom after it, exhausted, worn out, sore, but still just like a piece of meat. I walked into that bathroom, and I walked into the hand basin, and I remember looking in the mirror, and for the first time actually feeling like I saw myself for the first time. And I remember seeing myself in the mirror, which I'm sure I did many times before, but never actually saw myself. But I saw myself, and I looked at myself. I looked at myself in the eyes and leaned in. And as I did that, I saw beyond my physical form. I saw beyond the bruises on my cheek, the blood on my lips, the threadbare, torn, pale blue 90. I saw beyond all of that, through into my eyes. It was almost like I was reaching in to my eyes, to my solar plexus. And as I reached in, I grabbed something in my solar plexus. And for years after that, I called it my something. I didn't have a language. I didn't know what else to call it. I called it my something. And it was a very real thing. It was as real as this laptop is sitting in front of me that I'm talking to you on. It was real. And I grabbed it. And as I grabbed it, I was transcended outside. Right, in that moment, I was transcended outside. And I remember being outside. It was a cold morning, November, grey, as it often is in Dublin. And I was outside, but I wasn't cold. Didn't feel uncomfortable. I was barefoot. It all felt good. And I remember hearing the birds and feeling one with the birds. And I remember the leaves rustling in the trees and feeling one with the leaves, hearing the rain on the window pane, feeling one with that rain, hearing grass being cut in the distance and feeling one with that grass, and feeling one with the smell of cut grass. Just this feeling of oneness, this non-separateness, this oneness was just extraordinary. And it was just so expansive. And the next thing I remember is feeling this massive wash of something around me, like thousands of blankets around me, soft, soft, beautiful blankets. And it felt like, and I couldn't figure out what this feeling was. But it was wonderful, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I remember looking up and seeing myself, my physical body, looking at myself in the mirror. As I looked at myself, I realized what this was. This was the most exquisite, unbelievable, unconditional, universal love that I was feeling. It was exquisite. And in that moment, it was like all of this love that I was feeling, I've got goosebumps as I even remember it now, all of this love I poured into me, standing there, this girl broken, standing there looking in the mirror. And in that moment, literally what happened, I healed for everything that I had experienced, everything I was experiencing, and everything I was yet to experience. Time completely collapsed, and I healed in that moment. And this is another thing, one of the things that I've learned, come to understand, is in this sort of third dimensional life in the society that we live in, our perception of time is an illusion. What we understand about time in society, in our life in the third dimension, is linear, and that is an illusion. In the quantum field, in the spirit, in the soul space, it is not like that. All is now. All is now. And that's when you is our perception on lack of time. And it's purely an illusion. And when in that moment, I healed from everything. The next thing I recall was seeing infinite possibilities and potentiality that my life would become. I could see that there were paths of my life or options in my life that would lead to a prosperous life, an abundant life, a fun life, an adventurous life. I could see it all in front of me. There was no separation. It was possible. It was there. It is already there, which I've now come to understand and realize that in the quantum field, all realities exist right now. All. Yeah, the good, the bad, and the ugly, they all exist right now. But when I got back into my body, which felt like a long, long time, but I think it was probably only minutes, seconds, maybe, I don't know. But when I got back into my body, the girl that walked out of that bathroom was a very different girl that walked in. I walked in broken. I walked out with my something. And I remember thinking, you can break my body, but you can never, ever break my spirit. And this was a rock solid thing I had. I also knew something else, something that did not make sense, but it didn't scare me. I just accepted it. Didn't make sense. I knew I would escape. Without a shadow of a doubt, I knew I would escape. Again, I didn't worry about when, because I got that experience of collapsing time. I didn't worry about when. I just knew I would escape. I also knew that I would escape and I would get work in one of these fields. And this is going to sound crazy, because in light of the deeply spiritual experience I just had, I knew I would get a job or get work in trading, oil and gas, merchant banking, stockbroking, or shipping. Like, how crazy is that? I didn't even know what merchant banking was. I didn't know what stockbroking was. I had no idea what the significance of oil and gas was, or shipping. None. None. I didn't have a clue, but I just knew that that would be what I would do. I knew it with every fiber in my body. And looking back on it, I can understand why, because I had through being locked up and tortured and having no education, nothing. I learned that part of that experience was living in extreme poverty. There'd be days when I wouldn't have anything to eat. There'd be days when there was a couple of occasions I resorted to eating tinned dog food. I was so hungry. So poverty was my reality. So I had a desire, I gained a desire to live like, because what I saw was a life of potentiality, a life of abundance, life of prosperity, a life of adventure. And I understood in that moment is wealth, finance, money. And I had a desire to understand more about what makes life, what makes the world work, how does the cogs of the wheels of economies turn. I had a desire to understand that, and intuitively I understood that those business areas, those industries were the key to understanding that. So for the next while I set out to learn everything I could. Now remember, this was in the late 80s, right? There was no internet, there was no YouTube, there was none of that.
You found books.
Yeah. In Ireland, we had 2 TV channels. That was it. Okay. So it was not like 24/7 sort of like documentaries. And I remember walking out and thinking, I'm going to learn everything I can about economics, business, what makes the world go around, money, finance, everything. And I did. I learned, I studied everything I could about Adam Smith, the father of modern day economics, everything that I could, because I asked for the books and I got the books. So I was supported in my desire to learn. Now, here's the interesting thing. It took another 5 years for me to escape. Again, when you lose your attachment of time and you lean into trust and belief in aligned timing, perfect timing, lean into that, you lose that attachment and you lose all of the lack and perceptions of fear associated with it that allows you to become the being, the person you need to be in order to handle the dreams and the desires that you hold in your heart. And that's what that allowed me to do. I prepared myself. And yes, there were times when it was rotten, really awful, but there was a difference because my something I held on to, and no matter how bad it got, and it got bad, no matter how bad it got, I knew that nothing and no one could break my spirit. Could break my body, and never break my spirit. And when I did escape in the middle of the night, when I was in my early 20s, within 1 week, I had a job as a trading accountant on an oil and gas trading floor in London. Within 1 week, earning 6 figures. That is unheard of in those days, 6 figures. And that was just the beginning. When you understand that we are not separate from spirit, we are not separate from the universe, we are not separate to the universal wisdom, the universal intelligence, we're not separate from absolutely anything on this planet or in this universe. And when we apply our universal mind or our God mind or our Mother Nature mind, whichever is more comfortable for you, when you apply that level of thinking, which entails the what I would call the higher levels of conscious emotions, the synthesized emotions of love, compassion, empathy, gratitude, and appreciation, they are the abundant emotions that allow you to tap into that oneness. They separate you from the low vibrational emotions of polarized thinking, which is fear, shame, guilt, regret, apathy, all of those low vibrations where you feel that the world has harmed you, where someone has harmed you, where you feel that everything is being done to you, where you are a victim, where you are abused. When you separate yourself from that and you embody the oneness of who you truly are, that's when you start unlocking your true gifts. And yes, when you start creating the most extraordinary, mind-bending, illogical miracles and magic.
Yeah, that's incredible. And thank you for sharing that story. I'm curious because, a lot of times if people are wanting to change their life, it's working with a coach, it's reading Joe Dispenza's work, it's reading things, learning things. What do you think it was about that day that, like, you obviously had not read anything about knowing quantum physics and knowing all this stuff. What do you think it was about that day rather than any other previous time that all of a sudden made you have that moment?
I it's just a really good question. I think I'd had those experiences before, but never to that extent, which leads me to believe that I was not ready.
Okay.
I wasn't surrendered enough. And I think we all have the ability, and we all have moments where we tap into that super conscious state. We all have it, but we allow the ego to interrupt. We don't surrender to it. Now, I honestly do believe that there are many ways we can actually create that experience. I've created it in real life for clients of mine. We can create that level of experience, what I call contact with our higher self, as real as life, as what we understand as life. We can create that. Now, there are many ways in which we can do. We can do it instantaneously. We can do it spontaneously. We can do it in meditation. There's breath work. There's many ways in which we can do it. And we can also do it through an ascension process, through channeling. There's many, many ways we can do it. Here's what I've also learned is that, because for years, for years in my early days of talking about this and sharing this and working with people, people would often say to me, yeah, but you're lucky because you had those experiences. And it, for a while I thought, yeah, I hear you. But what I've come to learn and understand, and also have evidence of from people I've worked with, you do not have to go to the end of the line. You do not have to be at the cliff edge. You don't have to be at the end of the rope in order to have these experiences. But when often people who are at that place, they will tend to have those contact experiences because there's complete surrender. You have nothing in the human. There is nothing, and all there is left is the soul, is the spirit. And that's why it happens for people who do get to that point. But you don't have to. That's what's the thing I 100%, 100% know and believe and trust. I've seen it, I've witnessed it. You do not have to get there in order to experience it.
So on that note, since most of the people listening to this, myself included, are not in that like lowest point in our lives, we're all kind of, we're somewhere in life that we probably have goals and things that we aspire to and want to achieve and aren't sure how to get there. How do we start becoming aware of these things and surrendering to it and really getting a good really just finding that point for ourselves?
Yeah, totally great question. It is an extremely doable and a lot easier than you actually think. The source of human suffering, what I have come to understand, is the perception that we're separate from anything, separate from that which we desire, separate from abundance, separate from love, separate from our dreams. All right, that's the source of human suffering, is that perception of separateness. So no matter where you are in your life, on the trajectory of your life, or where you're headed in terms of, on a scale of 1 to 10, where you are on that scale in manifesting, materializing, becoming the person of your dreams, it doesn't matter where you are, you can experience this level of awareness and step into that. Because when you become aware of it and you step into it, you step into what I call your innate power, and you are guided by that wisdom rather than the perceptions of the human. The challenge is that the way society works and perpetuates is that we are responsive all the time from the ego, which is always based on polarity. It's predator or prey. It's life or death. It's survival or death. It's polarity, and in that polarity, there's always lack. There's always a predictability, because when we are living from the human space, the emotional, low vibrational human space, ego space, we have to always know there's prey, and we have to always know we can avoid predator. That's the way it works. That's how we live. And that's the illusion of the third dimension that society lives within. And so we're trying to survive, create, manifest, materialize, thrive in that context. And that becomes hard. That's a struggle. That's exhausting. That is stressful. That is overwhelm, where we are perceiving that anything that we desire is outside of ourselves and not within us. So the pathway, the first pathway, the first step to breaking that and stepping into all of who you are, the truth of who you are, which is a bit of a journey to take that. But the first step is to sit back and say, okay, I'm playing with the concept that I am the individualized physical manifestation of the universe. What does that mean? What does that mean? And when you start wrapping your head around that, what does that mean? So we are all one. We are all one mind. The universe is one. There is no separation. And each and every single one of us, or however number of billions of people there are now, 9 billion, each and every one of us is an individualized physical manifestation of the universe. What does that mean? It means everything is within us. Everything that we perceive in the universe is within us. This is not anything new. It's like the authors, the writers throughout time have written about this. The great minds have written about this. What we can perceive, we can achieve. There is nothing we can ever perceive that we cannot achieve, because when you see it, you have the ability to create it. It's only that when we are trapped in the dynamics or the context of the third dimension, the illusion of polarity, where we are separate from that which we desire, does the suffering actually happen. So when we understand that we are it, we are all, we have everything inside of us, there is nothing missing, then you start understanding, well, there's nothing's missing and I have everything inside of me, then everything that's ever happened has been for me, not to me. So you start playing with that concept. Okay, so anything that charges you, anything that you perceive has been done to you is going to overpower you. So you are subordinating to that. Rather than in your power, you've now given your power away to that. So when you start dancing with that question, you start looking at things differently. You start asking yourself different questions. And when you start asking yourself different questions, you get different answers, because the quality of your life is determined by the quality of questions you ask yourself, because our mind has to answer our questions. So we're asking ourselves, oh, why does this always happen to me? You're going to get answers that are, because you're a loser. Right? Whereas if you ask yourself the question, how has this served me? You're going to say, oh, well, I would never have known I was that strong. Or I would never have imagined I could have been that creative to get through that experience. So how did that serve me? So if I'm a creative person. Now all of a sudden you've learned something about yourself that you can now use. Now I'm really simplifying it here, but these are the sort of things these are the different types of experiences you have when you start playing and dancing with the universe in the context of, we are the individualized physical manifestation of the universe. You're asking yourself different quality questions, you're getting different quality answers that you can now apply to your life. And that's going to start elevating you out of the human thinking, the egoic thinking that is keeping you trapped in the illusion of the third dimension context. Then the next thing, when you start understanding that, okay, give it time, you wrap your head around that, then you ask yourself the next question. But everything that I desire, if that's the case, then everything that I desire is within me. Therefore, I have everything I require to create that which I desire. I have it. So when you start, so when you start trusting that, you start thinking and asking yourself that question. Okay, if I have everything that I in me to create that which I desire, how do I do it? From within, not seeking from outside, from a place of separation. And you start trusting your intuition. But here's the thing: when we are stuck and trapped in the context of the third dimension, it's very, very challenging to think like that, because we are being conditioned to believe we need a piece of paper that tells us we have a degree to be able to do that. Or we have a parent or a guardian or a teacher who says, you never amount to anything. And that's created a conditioning, it's created a belief span that we have compounded over time. It has created emotional coding that we respond to, that becomes our identity, it becomes our personality, it becomes a characteristic of ours. Do you see what I'm saying? So therefore we are addicted to predictability. So it's very challenging for the ego to let go, because we literally feel that we're unsafe. The idea of letting go of predictability makes us feel unsafe. So when you start getting to that point where you're asking yourself the question, I have it inside me, there's nothing missing. And then the ego says, don't be silly, don't be silly. Everyone in your life has ever told you you'll never amount to anything. And starts feeling very scratchy and itchy and horrible and nasty. And that's when you say to yourself, hold on a second, Mrs. Ego, Mr. Ego, Ms. Ego, whatever ego, you say, okay, I hear you, but you're safe. Because the thing is, your human is now threatened. Your human is now feeling unsafe. Because remember, the human's job, the ego in the human's job is to keep you alive, right? To have you interact, to have you socialize, to have you speak, engage. That's his role. But to quote Einstein, we have in society promoted the ego to the level of master and completely forgotten our intuitive, our sacred gift of intuition. And that's what we've done. So we subordinate all of the time to the ego, which is not the master. Our soul is the master. And every time when we start taking this journey out of the ego, out of the human to our higher self, the ego's conditioned pattern, conditioned reaction is to make us feel fear, which then pulls us back into it. So we have to exercise a level of self-mastery in order to say, oh, I hear you, I see you, but we're just going to play with this. We're just going to dance with this and see what happens. Because we are addicted to evidence. Because the ego needs evidence. Patternicity, it's what keeps animals alive, is patternicity. Patternicity allows us to seek out prey and avoid predator. So patternicity is patterns in our life that we are addicted to following, that will make sure that what we created yesterday will be what we create today, will be what we create tomorrow, and so on and so on and so on. So we'll never break out of this hamster wheel of patternicity that we've created in our life based on our past experiences. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
So we have to break that. There are many ways in which you can break that. You know, there's one of the processes that I created was the Trilogy of Transformation, is a tool that allows you to break that pattern, to trust in your higher self without evidence, without the necessity for evidence, because we are evidence seekers. Our ego is evidence seekers. It needs evidence. But it needs evidence in order to create predictability. And because of that addiction to predictability, we would rather guarantee failure than gamble success. We'd rather guarantee predictable, even though it's not what we truly desire. We'd rather know that we can guarantee that than the uncertainty of something that we might just, rather than the uncertain road to that which we desire, which is in actual fact our highest timeline. We'd rather take the lower timelines, because we'll always eventually get home to ourselves, always, eventually, whether it's this lifetime, another lifetime, whatever it is you believe in, or it's on the moment we die, whatever it is, we'll always eventually get back home to ourselves. But for people who are living in the context of the third dimension, in the lower levels, lower emotional, polarized emotions of separateness, that path is a very long and winding one. But when you take the jump to the highest timeline, which is the one where you lean into your own innate power, trust and believe without evidence, that's where you start creating. It's where you start asking yourself the question, I desire $10,000 months. I desire to be a millionaire. I desire a love of my life, a soulmate. I desire a mansion on a hill. I desire whatever it might be. How do I do that? Who do I need to be to do that? Who do I need to be to do that? How do I magnetize that into my life? How do I create that as my reality of my life? What do I need to be? All of those things, the feminine and the masculine energies of the how and the what. The next part of that equation then is any obstacle or challenge that you are experiencing is an invitation to step back into yourself, to your higher self, because it's an indication that you're now in separateness. So answer your question.
Yeah, that is all so fascinating. And like, I think it as a human, it is super hard to break out of that ego self, or what I like also say, the logical self. Like, we see these steps, and these are the steps we need to take to get to the end point.
Yes.
So someone lists like, so like I understand now from what you've explained is, we have to ask those questions differently to get into that higher self and all those steps. What are like, how do we start doing that? And I understand like on a deeper level, you do coaching for this, but like on a just kind of like, I want to take an action step today to start kind of changing things. Are we talking like meditation, gratitude? Like, what are some simple little things that we can start doing to at least start making some progress on our own?
So the first thing is what I often say to people is, who are you without all of the things? Who are you without your partner, without your children, without your parents, without your friends, without your job, without your money, without your material goods and without your business? Who are you? Who is that person? And can you feel joy, bliss, abundant, expansive, just for the spark of life that you have in you, the gift of life that you have? That's the first, is to start getting in touch with that and feeling joy, feeling happy for no reason, not for as long as, but for no reason. That is the first step. Because I remember that after I escaped, I had that joy, that delight, that exquisite funness. But I had everything not to have fun and joy for, because it wasn't all plain sailing when I escaped and I got this 6-figure job. For example, within 10 months, I was fired. Not because I couldn't do the work, but because, as you can imagine, I wasn't much of a conformist. I didn't know how to be in a corporate environment, especially at the level that I was positioned at, right? I didn't play nice in the sandpit, okay? That I didn't understand. Okay. So I would be contentious and I would stand my ground and I wouldn't do the political game thing. I didn't know how to. Right? I was fired. And they paid me to go quietly. And I guarantee you there was a collective sigh of relief the moment I walked out that door. Right? But I didn't apply a meaning to it. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay. Next. I didn't put any meaning to it. I didn't say, I'm useless, I'm no good, I'm never going to amount to anything. I didn't do that. I had no meaning applied to it because I was living from my God mind, my universal mind. That for many, many, many years after I escaped, I lived from that place. And the experiences that I had, I didn't apply the human or the third dimensional context to it. So I just went out and I thought, okay, I'll get another one. And sure enough, within a couple of weeks, I had another job and more money in the bank because they paid me to go. This happened to me 5 times. I actually had a career of being fired and getting paid every time I got fired. And every time I walked out the door, there was a collective sigh of relief. Until the final time, I remember by now I was living in South Africa. I remember looking up at Table Mountain with the sun rising above it or setting behind it. And I'm walking out with my money in my hand and my sweaty mitts. And I'm looking up and I'm thinking, I don't recall this being the plan. What now? This can't be it. But not applying a meaning to it, just like amazed. Really? Like this is now a few years later. And getting this feeling, getting this intuitive message. Now, we all get intuitive messages very differently. Some are auditory, some are visual, some are sort of a sensory. For me, it's very much sensory. And for me, the message was very clear. Do your own thing. Okay. All right. And I started my first ever business, which was called Dial a Teddy. It was my first ever business. And from then on, I've had many, many different businesses in many, many different industries. I've had the most diverse range of businesses that I've started in many different industries. Get an idea, I can perceive it, therefore I can achieve it, and I trust it. And no mortal distraction, no mortal context can take that away from me. When you get that level of belief, there is nothing you cannot achieve.
It's just so fascinating, everything, but really, I can't say I know anyone who has really dove into like who they are when you take all that other stuff away. Because we're, all of us are in our identities of a parent or a whatever worker or a runner or an athlete or you name it. And taking all of that away and just figuring out like who you are at your core, basically who you are at where you were at birth when you had nothing going for you yet.
Empire clothing, yes. Emperor's clothing, yes, totally. Not many people do that. I mean, people talk about that. And one of the reasons why we find it hard is because we fear that we're going to not like what we see. Because it's comfortable having all these identities that we've created. But you will learn that you will love what you see. And the more in touch with that person you can get, the more you can feel joy for no reason, happy, abundant, gratitude, to the point that your heart is bursting with gratitude. Your tears in your eyes, goosebumps down your arms. You will, when you can get there, you start discovering the truth of who you are, not what the context of the third dimensional society has allowed you to feel or be or do, but for you, who you are in all of your magnificence. Because you are perfect with your perfections and your imperfections equally. They make you exactly who you are, and exactly who you are is exactly everything you've got to live your greatest life, to live an iconic life. We are here as the individualized physical manifestation of the universe to fulfill our soul's purpose, and in doing so, fulfill our human purpose. Our human purpose serves that of our soul purpose, which is a physical expression of our soul. A physical expression of our soul. That's our purpose, to live the physical expression of our soul. How will you know what your soul is if you cannot get in touch with the truth of who you are? And when you get that, that is the foundation for an iconic life. Because you want to be able to get to the end of your life and say, if you were asked the question on your last breath, did you do everything you could with everything you were given in this life? You want to be able to say, hell yes. And living an iconic life will allow that, will guarantee that. Here's the thing, we are guaranteed over our lifetime. It is our illusion on our understanding of time and our perceptions of separateness that creates chaos, suffering, drama, trauma, pain in our life. And if more people step back into their authentic true self and connect with that, that's your God mind. That's your universal mind. And you start living from that, being guided by that, without the need for evidence, without the need for proof, without the need for logic or predictability. But that's where you start playing and dancing in the field of potentiality. And that's where synchronicities live. That's where magic happens. That's where you experience the miracles. Because we see them as miracles from the third dimensional context, but in the higher self, we see them as, wouldn't expect anything else, actually. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that's a beautiful spot to end this on. So on that note, if someone has more questions for you, or maybe is looking for some help to work on this, where can they find you? Where can they reach you?
Well, they can come and do, well, there's a couple of things. They come and join my Attuned to Wealth Facebook group. I hang out more on Facebook at the moment. Also, I do have a quiz as well, because what I have come to understand is our relationship to money and our ability to earn, hold on to, and grow wealth, financial wealth. It has a direct correlation with where we are in our levels of consciousness, whether we are stuck and trapped in the context of the third dimension, or whether we are elevated out beyond it. Because when you're stuck in the context of the third dimension, your wealth thermometer, as I call it, will be low. And you can actually have a lot of money, but still have a low wealth thermometer, because you won't be able to hold on to it. You won't be able to grow it. You're hitting a ceiling all the time. So I've developed this questionnaire quiz type thing, which is extremely accurate. And it tells you where you are on the levels of consciousness and gives you some guidelines as to what to do to stop breaking out of it. So they can also do that as well. I can send you the link for that as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Send me the link. And then you said your Facebook group was what again?
Attune to Wealth.
Attune to Wealth. Okay.
Yeah. So my thing is, because of that day, that spiritual moment I had, that out-of-body experience when I was about 15, when I decided I was going to get into stockbroking. One of my businesses today actually is trading. I've got a trading company where I teach people to trade my strategy. So I've never let go of the trading. I've created many businesses, and one of them is Trauma Traders. And we trade from the heart. We trade from intuition. That's why our traders are profitable. But where was I going with that? Oh yes. One of the things that I've come to realize is that And one of the reasons I believe that I became very fascinated with money and finance and abundant prosperity in terms of financial wealth was that I believe, and it's my understanding and my experience, that money, financial wealth, is a reflection of where we are at. So it's a really good gauge. Our relationship with money is a really good gauge as to where we are at the levels of consciousness. And as we shift, and here's a really important point, as we shift and break the ties with the third dimensional context, as we shift up the layers of levels of consciousness, what happens is we grow our wealth. It happens. It cannot be any other way. It's a universal law. So that's why I say money and wealth is the gift that keeps on giving, because it lets us know where we are at. And the greater the levels of consciousness we grow to, the more wealth we build. It's a byproduct. Okay. It happens naturally.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, send me that link. We can throw it in the show notes, and I'd be interested in doing it myself, just out of curiosity, because we can always get better at life.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I thought was a fascinating conversation, and I really hope the listeners will get a lot out of it as well.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, and I had so much fun. I love talking about this stuff.
I can tell.
Thank you so much, Brianna.